Hey there, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the channel. I'm so glad you're here with me today for this absolutely incredible story. Before we dive into the story, tell me where in the world you are watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments below. And if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? Hit that subscribe button right now because we've got stories that you won't want to miss. Now, let's get back into the story. Lena Moretti never thought she'd kneel on a rain-drenched street, holding the man who once walked into her diner like a quiet storm. She never imagined the weight of his head in her lap, the cold fear in her chest as she whispered his name, or the trembling hands of the twins clinging to her coat behind her. And she certainly didn't know, not then, that the man lying helpless in her arms was the one the city feared, whispered about, and obeyed in the shadows. This is the story of how a simple waitress was pulled into a world she never asked for, and how the man everyone called a monster turned out to be the one person she couldn't bear to lose. Life has a funny way of playing tricks on you. One moment, you're just a regular person thinking about tomorrow's grocery list, and the next, your whole world tips upside down. That's exactly what happened to Lena. Lena was the kind of person you'd call a rock. Not flashy, not loud, but absolutely dependable. She worked as a registered nurse at the Toronto General Hospital, specializing in pediatrics. Her days were spent soothing crying babies and reassuring worried parents. At 36, she lived in a quiet, older neighborhood in North York, a little area filled with trees and houses that had seen better days, but were cozy nonetheless. It was the kind of place where folks still knew their neighbors. On this particular night, the air was sharp and cold, the kind of weather that tells you winter is serious business in Canada. Lena was walking home from her late shift, her worn nurse's bag slung over her shoulder. She had taken the scenic route, cutting through a dimly lit side street that she usually avoided, just because she wanted 5 extra minutes of peace before facing her apartment and the pile of laundry waiting for her. She had her headphones in, listening to some classic reggae. Bob Marley always seemed to lift the weight of a long shift. Then, she heard it. It wasn't loud enough to cut through the music, but a sharp, awful sound that made the hairs stand up on her arms. It was a cry, high-pitched and full of pure, gut-wrenching terror. Lena pulled the headphones off so fast they nearly slipped out of her hand. She froze, listening hard. The street was dark, lit only by the weak, flickering bulb of a nearby lamppost and the glow spilling from a few house windows. The crying came again, closer this time, and mixed with a strange, heavy dragging sound. Curiosity battled with a serious dose of dread, but the nurse in Lena won out. She started walking quickly toward the sound, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. And then she saw them. Tucked into the narrow, shadowy space between a parked van and a brick fence was a man. He was slumped against the wall, but his arms were wrapped tightly around 2 small figures huddled against his chest. Even from a distance, Lena could see the darkness spreading quickly on the front of his jacket. Blood. A lot of it. Lena broke into a run, dropping her bag without a thought. "Hey, are you okay? I'm a nurse, I can help," she yelled, her voice shaking despite her professional training. As she got closer, the scene sharpened into agonizing focus. The man looked rugged, maybe late 30s, with strong, dark features and a jacket that looked expensive, but was now ruined. His eyes were open, wide with pain and a desperate kind of love. But it wasn't him that made Lena gasp. It was the children. They were twins, perhaps 5 or 6 years old, dressed in matching little denim jackets. They weren't crying anymore, they were just clinging to their father, their faces mashed into his chest, their small bodies trembling violently. Their terror was so deep it had silenced them. The man, Adrian, managed to lift his head slightly, his breathing ragged. "Please, my kids," he whispered, the words catching in his throat. "Keep them safe. Just keep them safe." Lena dropped to her knees beside him, her mind immediately shifting into emergency mode. She didn't hesitate. "It's okay. I'm here. Don't talk, just breathe," she instructed, pulling off her scarf and pressing it instinctively onto the wound near his shoulder. It was a bad one. "What are your names, sweeties? Are you hurt?" she asked the twins, speaking softly, trying to penetrate their shock. They just shook their heads, unable to look up. This is the point in the story where a regular person might panic, but Lena was used to trauma. Her hands were steady, even as her adrenaline spiked. She pulled out her phone, her fingers slick with cold and fear, and dialed the emergency number. "Yes, I need an ambulance and police immediately," she said, her voice clear and precise. "I am on Sycamore Avenue, near the corner of Elm Street. I have a male victim with a gunshot wound and 2 small children. He is conscious, but status is critical. I'm a registered nurse. I'm providing pressure." She repeated the address, making sure the operator understood. All the while, Adrian watched her, his grip tightening on his children, never letting them go. "Kids, look at me," Lena said gently, trying to distract them and get them to release their dad so she could fully assess the wound. "You are so brave. Your dad is a hero, keeping you safe. Tell me, what's your name?" A little girl, the one tucked closest to the man's neck, finally spoke, her voice barely a squeak. "I'm Maya. This is my brother, Liam." "Maya and Liam," Lena repeated, offering them the most reassuring smile she could muster. "Those are beautiful names. We're going to get your dad some help, okay?" The minutes that followed felt like an hour. Lena kept talking, to Adrian, giving him simple instructions to breathe, to the children, telling them stories about her hospital stuffed animals, and to the dispatcher, keeping them updated on the man's deteriorating condition. When the sirens finally wailed in the distance, Lena felt a wave of relief wash over her. Help was here. Everything was going to be all right. But that feeling vanished the moment the first police car skidded to a stop. 2 officers rushed out, but their movements were strange. They weren't focused on the wounded man. One of them immediately started scanning the rooftops and the alleyways, not even glancing at Adrian. The other officer approached Lena, but instead of asking about the victim, she started giving commands. "Step back, ma'am. Move away from the victim and the children now." "But he's bleeding out. I'm a nurse, I have to maintain pressure." Lena protested, refusing to move her hand. "I said move." "This is a crime scene," the officer insisted, her tone sharp and cold, lacking any of the professional urgency Lena expected for a life-threatening injury. Then the ambulance arrived, and the paramedics, bless them, moved with the speed Lena knew and trusted. They quickly took over, placing a neck brace on Adrian and prepping him for the gurney. As they were carefully lifting him, Adrian's hand shot out, weakly grabbing Lena's sleeve. "The children. Don't let them take the children," he whispered, his eyes pleading. "Promise me." "I promise," Lena said instantly, squeezing his hand. "I won't leave them." The exchange was seen by the police officer, and that's when things went from bad to terrifyingly wrong. As Adrian was loaded into the back of the ambulance, a second wave of police cars, unmarked, sleek black SUVs, screamed onto the scene. These were not the usual neighborhood patrol cars. Out stepped men and women in dark, tailored clothes who moved with a silent, ruthless efficiency. They looked like something out of a spy movie, and their gaze was fixed entirely on the twins. The lead agent, a tall, severe-looking woman with eyes that missed nothing, walked straight up to Lena, ignoring the chaos of the paramedics and the patrol officers. "Agent Davis. We will be taking custody of the children," she stated flatly, not asking, but announcing. Lena stepped between the agent and the terrified children, who were still standing right where their father had left them, clutching each other. "Excuse me. I'm Lena Morris. I was here. Their father asked me to keep them safe," Lena challenged, her nurse calm turning into fierce, protective anger. "Who are you? These children need a social worker and to be with someone they know, not this." She gestured to the intimidating team of agents. Agent Davis's gaze hardened. "These children are under the immediate protection of the government. Their father, Adrian. He is not who you think he is, Miss Morris. He is a person of interest in a federal investigation. You need to step aside." The words hung in the cold night air. "He is not who you think he is." Lena looked down at Maya and Liam. They were just two innocent kids whose whole world had been shattered by a single brutal act of violence. She looked back at the cold, official faces of the agents. Something deep inside her told her that handing them over to this group of people was the last thing Adrian wanted. It felt wrong, utterly wrong. Adrian hadn't been afraid of the shooter. He had been afraid of them. It's moments like these that test what we're truly made of. If you're loving this story so far, do us a favor and share this video with a friend who loves a good mystery. The standoff lasted only a few tense seconds, but it changed Lena's life forever. She looked at the twins' tear-streaked faces, remembered Adrian's desperate, dying promise, and made a choice that would pull her straight out of her predictable hospital life and into a dangerous, unseen world. "No," Lena said, her voice suddenly steady and low. "I promised their father. I'm taking them to the hospital to be with him. You can talk to my lawyer." Before Agent Davis could react, Lena gently scooped up Maya and Liam, one under each arm, whispering, "Let's go, my brave ones." She turned and walked away from the glaring police lights and the black SUVs, walking purposefully towards the direction Adrian's ambulance had taken. The agents shouted, but they didn't immediately move to stop a nurse walking away with two crying children in full view of the local police and gathering neighbors. The scene was too messy, too public for their slick, hidden operation. As Lena hurried down the street, clutching the twins who were finally sobbing softly against her chest, she looked back once. Agent Davis was watching her, and the look on her face was not one of confusion, but pure, chilling intent. Lena knew then that she wasn't just babysitting two terrified kids. She had just stepped into the middle of a serious, dangerous mess, and the man she had tried to save had just entrusted her with his entire, secret life. She had to protect these children, no matter the cost, because somewhere, Adrian was fighting for his life, and she was the only shield his children had left. The promise she made was the only lifeline left in the cold darkness. She held the twins tighter, their small, fragile presence a heavy weight of responsibility and a sudden, fierce rush of purpose. Everything had changed, and Lena, the reliable ordinary nurse, was ready to fight. Hospitals, for all the good they do, are strange places. They hum with a low, constant level of activity. Beeps, hushed voices, the squeak of shoes on polished linoleum floors. It's a place where lives hang in the balance, a world Lena knew better than her own kitchen. But when she walked through the double doors of Toronto General that night, holding Maya and Liam, the hospital felt less like her sanctuary and more like the battlefield she had just left. She had managed to get the twins through the emergency entrance without attracting the attention of Agent Davis's crew. Luckily, the initial chaos was focused entirely on the crime scene. She had ushered the children into a quiet, unused waiting area near the pediatric wing, where she worked. She gave them juice boxes and a warm blanket she swiped from a supply closet. Maya and Liam were quiet now, exhausted from the trauma, watching Lena with huge, wary eyes. "I have to check on your dad, okay? I just need to know which room he's in," Lena explained softly, crouching down to their level. "You two stay right here. No matter what, you stay put. Can you do that for me?" They nodded solemnly. Their trust in her, a complete stranger, was a heavy, unexpected gift. Finding Adrian was surprisingly easy and, at the same time, alarming. Usually, a gunshot victim from the streets is just another number, placed wherever there's space. But Adrian wasn't in a shared room or even the regular trauma ward. He was on the 10th floor, tucked away in a private recovery suite, and outside his door stood two very large, very serious-looking men in suits. They didn't look like family, they looked like bodyguards. Lena approached them, her spine stiffening into its professional, nurse-in-charge posture. "Excuse me. I need to see the patient in this room." "Adrian." One of the men, who had the thickest neck Lena had ever seen, simply blocked the door. "He's resting. No visitors." "I am not a visitor. I was with him when he was shot. I am the one who stabilized him and called the ambulance," Lena stated firmly. "And I have his children. I need to know his condition and relay information to him about their safety." The mention of the children was like a switch. The men exchanged a quick, meaningful glance. The one who had spoken pulled out a discreet earpiece and mumbled something low and rapid into it. He listened for a moment, his eyes darting quickly over Lena, assessing her scrubs and name badge. He seemed to decide she was less of a threat and more of a nuisance. "Wait here," he finally grunted, and he cracked the door open just enough to slip inside. Lena stood in the sterile hallway, listening to the muffled voices inside. The silence stretched, making the mundane sounds of the hospital feel incredibly loud. Just as she was about to push the door open herself, the bodyguard reappeared, looking even more stressed. "You can go in. 5 minutes. No more." Lena pushed past him and stepped into the room. It smelled faintly of antiseptic and something sharper, metallic. Adrian was lying in the bed, pale but awake. He was hooked up to a tangle of tubes and monitors, but his eyes were wide open and blazing with a fury that took Lena's breath away. The room wasn't just guarded on the outside. 3 more men, dressed identically to the ones outside, were positioned in the corners, watching the door, the window, and Lena herself. They moved like silent shadows, their attention focused on everything but the patient. It was a clear, terrifying demonstration of protection. Adrian looked right past the other people in the room, his gaze locking on to Lena. "You," he spat out, the effort making him wince. His voice was rough, laced with pain and a shocking amount of cold anger. "Why are you here? Where are my children?" Lena walked closer, ignoring the stares of the men in suits. She pulled a chair over and sat down, making sure she was calm despite the tense, almost explosive atmosphere. "They are safe. I have them tucked away where they are warm, and they are sleeping," she said, keeping her voice even and low. "They are fine, Adrian. I promised you I would keep them safe, and I did. But let's talk about that promise, because when the police arrived, they didn't act like this was a random shooting." Adrian's jaw tightened. "You shouldn't have been there. You shouldn't have seen their faces. You should have left me on the street. What kind of person leaves someone to bleed out?" Lena countered, her own frustration rising. "I saved your life. And in return, you look furious that I didn't abandon your terrified children to a team of federal agents who looked like they'd come straight out of a video game." He closed his eyes for a moment, taking a slow, shaky breath. When he opened them, the anger was still there, but mixed now with a layer of calculation. He looked less like a grateful patient and more like a commander evaluating a mistake. "You don't understand what you've done, Lena Morris," he said, reading her name off her badge, a small detail that suddenly felt deeply invasive. "You interfered with things you shouldn't have touched. Those people, Agent Davis and her crew, they are less of a problem than the people who put this bullet in me." He gestured vaguely to the bandages underneath his hospital gown. "Well, maybe if you told me who you are, I could understand." Lena whispered, leaning closer, keeping her voice down so the bodyguards wouldn't hear. "I need to know the truth. Who are you, Adrian? Because nurses don't usually walk into a room with this much security, and their children aren't usually being hunted by secret government teams." Adrian just stared at her, a silent refusal. Around them, the bodyguards shifted, their collective silence making their presence heavier. Everything about this room screamed danger and money, power and secrecy. Lena had nursed wealthy people before, CEOs and politicians, but this felt different. It was the air of controlled menace, the implicit understanding that these men could deal with any threat quickly and violently. This is a story about finding courage in the darkest places. If you're feeling hooked by Adrian's secrets, help us keep the story going. Give us a thumbs up and ring that notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter. One of the bodyguards near the window, the one who hadn't moved since Lena entered, took a single silent step forward. It was a clear signal that her time was up. 5 minutes is over, the guard stated, his voice a low monotone. Lena didn't flinch. She addressed Adrian again. "The twins are asking for you. They don't understand. They are 5 years old. They need reassurance. Are you going to be here when they wake up?" The question finally pierced the shield of his anger and power. Adrian's gaze softened just a fraction, a brief flicker of the desperate father Lena had met on the street. Tell them I'm in a meeting. A very important, long meeting, he instructed, the lie tasting bitter even to her. And Lena, listen to me closely. You are not safe anymore. By protecting them, you have made yourself a target. You need to take them and leave the city. Tonight. Use the first flight out. Any flight. Leave. Adrian, I have a job, a life, a rental agreement. Lena scoffed, standing up. And I'm not running from two traumatized kids. They need stability, not another upheaval. I told them I promised you. Now, what do you want me to do with them? Who should I call? He looked utterly defeated, the exhaustion of the injury finally showing through his rage. He knew she wouldn't leave, and he also knew he couldn't force her. There is no one to call. No one you can trust, he admitted, his voice barely a rasp. Just keep them close. Don't tell anyone you know me. Don't let them leave your sight. And for God's sake, keep them off the street. They can't be seen. This was the first honest plea she'd heard from him. It was the desperate voice of the father, overriding the powerful, dangerous man. And you? She challenged, walking toward the door. What happens to you now? Adrian managed a grim, faint smile. I woke up. And I deal with the mess I've made. Now go. And don't come back here, Lena. For your own safety. As she stepped out, the bodyguard instantly closed the door, sealing Adrian back inside his guarded fortress of secrets. Lena walked back down the long, silent corridor, the pieces of information spinning in her head. Powerful. Dangerous. Federal investigation. No one to trust. This wasn't a simple case of a robbery gone wrong. This was deep, murky water, and she was already sinking in it. But when she got back to the quiet waiting area, the sight of Maya and Liam curled up together under the blanket, their small hands linked even in sleep, washed away the fear the bodyguards had instilled. They looked so vulnerable, so completely dependent on her promise. Lena sank onto the chair next to them, reaching out to gently brush Liam's tangled hair back from his forehead. She realized she might not know who Adrian was, but she knew why she was doing this. She was doing it for these two children. They weren't just the children of some dangerous, secret man. They were two little souls who needed someone to be their shield when the world got too cold and too big. She looked at her nurse's watch. It was past midnight. She was tired, scared, and now involved in something that could shatter her orderly life. But as she watched the gentle rise and fall of the twins' breathing, a fierce, protective certainty settled over her heart. She hadn't just saved Adrian's life. She had inherited the only good thing he seemed to have left. Lena made a new promise right there, under the quiet glow of the hospital lights. She wouldn't run. She would figure out how to keep these children safe, and somehow, she would bring peace back into their storm-tossed lives. She stood up, pulling the blanket higher over the twins' shoulders, and started thinking about where in her small North York apartment she could hide two very important, very secret children. It was going to be a long night, but Lena had never backed down from a challenge that involved protecting the innocent. Hope, she decided, was going to be her battle plan. Getting Maya and Liam into her apartment building without drawing attention felt like a scene straight out of a low-budget spy film. Lena lived on the third floor of an old red-brick building with squeaky stairs, and every floorboard seemed to protest their presence with a loud creak. But they made it. Her apartment was small, a tight living room that doubled as a dining area, a cramped kitchen, and one bedroom. It was cozy, but suddenly, with two traumatized children and the looming threat of secret agents, it felt claustrophobic. Lena knew she couldn't just put them in her bed and go to sleep. She set up a makeshift camp on the living room floor, pulling out every blanket and pillow she owned. She even found a children's movie, an old classic about talking animals, and put it on with the volume very low, hoping the familiar light and sound would soothe them. Maya and Liam, however, were not moving from Lena's side. The moment she tried to stand up to grab a glass of water, they would silently clutch the fabric of her worn scrubs, their eyes wide with fear. They didn't cry now, They just clung, a silent, desperate attachment to the one person who had been there when their world shattered. They were like two small, terrified barnacles refusing to let go of the ship. Lena sat with them, one on each side, their small heads resting on her thighs. She stroked their hair gently, talking to them in soft, simple sentences about her day, about the funny old cat that lived downstairs, and about how brave they were. "My dad. Is he really in a meeting?" Liam finally asked, his voice thick and sleepy. "He is," Lena confirmed, even though the lie felt heavy. "A super important one, Liam. But he's safe, and he knows you two are safe. That's what matters most right now." "Did he get hurt because he was protecting us?" Maya asked, looking up at Lena. Lena hesitated. She could have lied, but the fierce intelligence in the little girl's eyes told her that Maya already knew the truth was bad. "He got hurt," Lena admitted honestly, "because he loves you both more than anything. He made sure you were safe first." That seemed to be enough. Slowly, finally, exhaustion won. They drifted off, their grip loosening slightly, but still firmly resting against her. Lena didn't sleep. She sat there in the dark, watching the muted colors of the movie screen reflect off their innocent faces. The quiet of the apartment was soon broken by the insistent, low vibration of her phone. It was Adrian. She fumbled for the device, answering on the first ring, keeping her voice hushed. "They're asleep. They are fine," she immediately reported. "Good." Adrian's voice was gravelly, strained by the pain and the effort of speaking. He sounded like a different person than the furious, guarded man from the hospital. "They are also not letting me out of their sight. I can't take them anywhere. They're terrified." "I'm stuck here, Adrian," Lena whispered into the phone. "And I have to go to work tomorrow. They can't stay here alone." There was a long silence on the other end, punctuated only by a few harsh breaths. Lena knew he was struggling with what she was saying. The fact that the children were so dependent on her completely destroyed his plan for her to disappear and take them with her. Their trauma had tied Lena to them, and by extension, to him. "You need to bring them here," Adrian finally said, the decision heavy in his voice. "Not to the hospital. To the safe house." "Safe house? What are you talking about? And why would I bring two traumatized children into a safe house?" Lena demanded, trying to keep her temper. "Because they are only safe where I tell you they are safe, Lena. You can't leave them, and I can't be gone for long. It's the only way for me to keep eyes on them without alerting Davis or—" He stopped himself, cutting off the name he was about to say. "Alerting who, Adrian? Who are you afraid of that's worse than the federal government?" Lena pressed, but he wouldn't answer. Instead, he quickly gave her an address, a specific condo building on the outskirts of the city, not far from the airport. He gave her a 4-digit code and told her exactly where to go. "The unit will be empty. There's food. The door is reinforced. Do not tell anyone you are going there. Do not call, do not text. Just go," he commanded. "One of my men will be watching from a distance, but he won't approach unless you are in trouble. Get there before morning. It's the only way you can go to work and know they're protected." Lena hung up, her heart pounding. A safe house. Everything about this screamed criminal operation. Why would a normal law-abiding man have armed guards, federal agents chasing his children, and secret, reinforced apartments? She looked down at the twins, who stirred slightly but didn't wake. She remembered the look in Adrian's eyes when he was shot. Not the anger of the powerful man, but the terror of a father. Was he a criminal, or was he someone running from criminals? It was in that moment, sitting under the warm, comforting weight of the sleeping children, that a chilling thought crystallized for Lena. The injury. Adrian had been shot protecting the twins. He was shielding them, covering them completely. The placement of the bullet, high on his shoulder, suggested he'd been twisted away from the shooter, his body entirely covering theirs. He wasn't just running, he was defending. If he was a powerful criminal, she thought, he would have had his men deal with the threat long before it got close enough to endanger his kids. If he was a bad guy, He would have sacrificed his position to save his life. Instead, he had taken the bullet for them. If you're enjoying this deep dive into Adrian's secrets, remember to hit that subscribe button. Every subscription helps us share these powerful stories of love and courage. Lena knew the difference between the defensive wounds of a victim and the tactical injuries of a fighter. Adrian's wound felt like the former. She made a decision. She couldn't abandon the twins, and she certainly couldn't leave them unprotected in her unlocked apartment. She had to go to the safe house, not because she trusted Adrian, but because she trusted her gut about the two little people sleeping on her lap. Carefully, Lena started waking them up, explaining that they were going to a secret, new, temporary home where they could wait for their dad. She kept the language simple and exciting, turning it into a little adventure. By 4 a.m., Lena, Maya, and Liam were in a taxi, heading toward the luxurious, anonymous condo building. When they got out, the air was cold and still dark. The building was glass and steel, towering over the neighborhood, a world away from Lena's cozy brick walk-up. She used the code Adrian gave her. The apartment was immaculate, sterile, and entirely impersonal. It had clearly been prepped for quick use. As soon as she closed the reinforced door behind them, the noise of the city vanished. The silence was absolute. The condo overlooked the city, the lights spread out like scattered jewels. "Wow," whispered Liam, standing by the huge window, finally distracted from his fear. "It's like a castle," Maya breathed. Lena managed a tired smile. "A temporary castle. Come on, let's find the kitchen." In the kitchen, Lena found the usual hospital-grade first aid kit she always carried, and the sight of it reminded her of her duty. She needed to check Adrian's condition. She used the apartment's landline to call the hospital wing where he was. After several tense minutes of arguing with the guarded desk staff, she was connected to a nurse she knew. "I need to know Adrian's status now," Lena told her colleague, keeping her voice firm. The nurse, speaking carefully, gave her the update. Adrian had been stable after surgery, but had become aggressive a few hours later, demanding discharge and trying to rip out his fore. He was heavily sedated now. "And listen, Lena," the nurse whispered. "A very senior doctor, a chief of staff, has been running interference all night. He's taking orders from someone way above his pay grade. This isn't just about a shooting. I think he's going to be moved, maybe even tonight. This hospital is compromised." The news hit Lena hard. Adrian was more powerful than she thought, powerful enough to commandeer hospital personnel, yet vulnerable enough to get shot while protecting his children. She hung up, her mind racing. Criminal. Maybe. But his actions were all about protection, not power. He was an injured lion trying to keep his cubs safe, and the entire city seemed to be his cage. Lena spent the remaining hour before sunrise making sure the twins ate a small breakfast and found a comfortable bed. She tucked them in together, kissing their foreheads. They finally, truly rested, secure behind the triple-locked door, their fear momentarily pushed back by the feeling of safety Lena provided. As the sun began to peek over the Toronto skyline, painting the room in hues of orange and soft pink, Lena looked down at the two children. She was exhausted, terrified, and officially entangled in a dangerous secret. But looking at the peace on their faces, she felt a profound surge of purpose. She wasn't just a nurse anymore. She was their guardian, their reluctant protector. She grabbed her coat, ready to face her shift at the hospital and figure out her next move. She knew one thing for sure: she was going to find out who Adrian really was, and she wasn't going to stop until his children were truly free. Love, she realized, often required a kind of courage she never knew she possessed. She smiled, feeling a mix of dread and determination, and quietly stepped out the door, locking it firmly behind her. Lena walked into the familiar, antiseptic smell of the hospital, feeling utterly detached from her normal life. The scrubs felt like a costume, and the cheerful good morning greetings from her colleagues felt like noise. How could life be so normal when she had two children hidden in a reinforced condo and a powerful, secret man fighting for his life just a few floors above her? She had barely clocked in and poured a cup of lukewarm coffee when her supervisor, A woman named Ms. Henderson, who was usually a whirlwind of focused energy, approached her with a strange, serious expression. "Lena, 2 detectives are here to see you. They've been waiting. They asked to speak with you privately about the shooting the other night," Ms. Henderson said, keeping her voice low. "They're in the small conference room." Lena's heart sank, a cold weight dropping into her stomach. She had expected this, but the speed was unnerving. She took a moment to steady her breathing, putting on her professional mask. She knew exactly what she had to do. Lie, but lie convincingly, sticking to the truth of the medical situation while scrubbing away every dangerous detail about Adrian and the twins. The conference room was small and smelled faintly of stale coffee. Sitting across the table were 2 detectives. Detective Reynolds, a tall, older man with tired eyes, and Detective Miller, a younger woman who looked sharp, observant, and impossible to fool. "Ms. Morris, thank you for taking the time," Reynolds began, his voice slow and deliberate, like he was conserving energy. "We just need to clarify a few things about the incident on Sycamore Avenue 2 nights ago." Lena sat down, placing her hands flat on the table. "Of course, Detective. I've told the officers everything I know. I was walking home from a late shift. I heard screaming, and I found a man and 2 children. I stabilized the victim, called 911, and waited for paramedics." Detective Miller leaned forward, her eyes never leaving Lena's face. "The children. Maya and Liam. Where are they now, Ms. Morris?" "I don't know," Lena stated calmly, pushing down the surge of guilt. "They were incredibly distressed. The paramedics took the father, Adrian, away, and I stayed with the children until the patrol officers and she paused, deliberately using simple language, "the other government people arrived. I assumed they took custody of the children and arranged for a social worker. Reynolds took over. But we were told the federal agents from Agent Davis's team never took custody. They said you walked off with the children and they lost track of you." Lena feigned surprise, widening her eyes. "That's ridiculous. I'm a nurse. I would never abduct children. I escorted them a short distance down the street. They were hysterical, to calm them down until the proper authorities could take over. I had to get back to the hospital. I had an early shift the next day. I saw a woman who looked official talking to a uniform officer, and I assumed they were taking over. This is a story about how far a person will go when protecting the innocent. If Lena's courage is inspiring you, hit that like button and subscribe to keep following her incredible journey." She stuck firmly to the narrative. "I was just a good Samaritan nurse." She omitted the conversation with Adrian, the promise, the look in Agent Davis's eyes, and the sheer number of unmarked cars. She kept her sentences short, factual, and focused only on the medical aspect. Miller tried a different angle. "Did the man, Adrian, say anything to you before he was transported? Anything about who shot him? Or maybe who he was?" "He was barely conscious. All he said was, 'My kids.' He was worried about his children, as any father would be," Lena replied, injecting a touch of emotional honesty to make the lie more believable. "He was focused on keeping them safe, nothing more. I didn't get his full name or anything personal. I was focused on stopping the bleeding." The questioning lasted for another 20 agonizing minutes. They circled around the children, around Adrian's identity, and around the involvement of the federal team. Lena held firm, her training as a professional allowing her to maintain a calm exterior even as panic was bubbling inside. Finally, the detective seemed satisfied, or perhaps just frustrated. They thanked her for her time and left, but Detective Miller's parting look told Lena she was far from convinced. The encounter left Lena shaky. She knew the police would eventually connect her to Adrian's presence in the hospital, and they would certainly be tracking her if they suspected she had the twins. She had to visit the safe house immediately after her shift. The day dragged on, filled with the mundane reality of sick children and demanding parents, a stark contrast to the thrilling danger of her new secret life. As her shift ended, she made a quick call to the safe house's landline. A tiny, relieved voice answered. "Hello." It was Maya. "Hi, sweetie. It's Lena. Is everything okay? Yes, we watched all the cartoons, Maya chirped. But Liam is hungry. I'm on my way, Maya. Stay inside and don't open the door for anyone, okay? I love you. Lena hung up, feeling a fleeting moment of warmth that was instantly replaced by a fresh wave of dread. She was about to step out of the hospital doors and into the darkening evening when she saw it. She had parked her small, sensible Honda Civic in the covered hospital parking lot. As she approached her car, she saw something glinting on the pavement right next to her driver's side tire. It was a small, brass casing. A shell casing, the kind left behind by a fired bullet. Lena froze. She knew exactly what it was. She was a nurse. She had seen enough gunshot victims to know the grim, cold reality of ammunition remnants. But it wasn't the casing itself that chilled her. It was the context. It wasn't buried in the dirt or lost in the general mess of the lot. It was placed precisely on the clean, dark pavement, positioned right next to her tire, as if someone had dropped it there for her to find. And then she saw the deep, fresh slash mark running across the back of her tire's sidewall. A deep, deliberate cut. This wasn't random. This wasn't a warning from the police or the federal agents. They would use warrants and legal pressure. This was raw, silent, criminal threat. Adrian's enemies had found her. They didn't need to see her face to know she was helping him. They just needed to track the last person seen with his children, the one person who kept circling back to the hospital. The message was crystal clear. We know who you are. We know your car. You are in our sight. Stop helping Adrian, or the next bullet won't be on the pavement. Lena didn't dare touch the casing. She backed away slowly, her mind scrambling. This was not a domestic dispute or a misunderstanding. Adrian was right. She was caught in a war, a silent, brutal conflict where lives were disposable and threats were delivered with cold efficiency. The blood on the pavement from 2 nights ago had now metaphorically stained her own small, ordinary life. She immediately pulled out her phone and called a cab. She would not drive that car. She couldn't risk the tire blowing out while the twins were with her. She also knew she couldn't call Adrian, who was likely still sedated, but she had to warn his people. She called the hospital floor and asked to speak to the bodyguard. After a brief argument, she got the thick-necked man from the night before. Listen to me, Lena hissed into the phone, her voice shaking with controlled fear. I just found a warning on my car in the parking lot. A shell casing and a slashed tire. Your boss's enemies know I'm involved. They know who I am, and they know where I work. You need to double your security, and I need an immediate, safer way to communicate with you. The guard listened in silence, not offering comfort, just cold confirmation. Acknowledged. I will pass the message. Do not use your phone to call here again. Use only the landline at the safe house. We will send someone to pick up your vehicle. He hung up. Lena stood by the entrance, waiting for the cab, her eyes scanning every car, every face. The simple act of waiting felt terrifying. She realized that the people hunting Adrian and the twins were organized, efficient, and ruthless. They were closer than she thought. When the taxi finally pulled up, Lena dove into the back seat, giving the address for the condo. As the car drove away, she looked back at the hospital building, a concrete monolith hiding a dozen secrets. She was a nurse, trained to heal and comfort. But suddenly, Lena felt an unfamiliar and fierce adrenaline pumping through her veins. They wanted her to back down? They wanted her to abandon 2 innocent children? They had underestimated the strength of a promise, and they had certainly underestimated the lengths a caring person would go to when love and justice were on the line. She was terrified, but she was also angry. As she sped toward the quiet comfort of the safe house and the warmth of the twins waiting inside, Lena understood that the war Adrian was fighting was now hers, too. She had 2 small, fragile hostages on her side, and her only weapon was her compassion and her growing determination to protect them. She would not back down, not now that she had blood on her own pavement. She was ready to fight the silent war. The transition from the anonymous safe house condo to Adrian's actual home was jarring. It happened late that night, hours after Lena had arrived at the condo and reassured the frightened twins. The same thick-necked bodyguard, who introduced himself simply as Gus, arrived in a massive black SUV with tinted windows. He was all silent, efficient business, treating Lena with a cold deference that spoke volumes about her new status as the children's essential guardian. The drive was long, winding through the city and out into an exclusive, heavily wooded area known for its isolated estates. When they finally pulled up, Lena felt a gasp catch in her throat. This wasn't a house. It was a fortress. The mansion was enormous, built of dark stone and glass, sitting back from the road behind towering electronic gates and thick landscaping. Security cameras dotted the perimeter like watchful metallic eyes. It was opulent, intimidating, and utterly filled with shadows. Inside, the luxury was overwhelming. High ceilings, polished marble floors, and massive, contemporary art pieces hung on the walls. It was the kind of wealth that didn't need to shout to be heard. But even amidst the expensive furniture and the silent, immaculate space, Lena could feel the tension radiating off the place. She was immediately led through the house to the children's wing. It was here, in the domestic space, that the contradictions of Adrian's life became painfully clear. Maya and Liam were already asleep in two beautifully furnished, matching bedrooms, clearly designed with endless love and money. They were surrounded by soft toys, bookshelves overflowing with children's classics, and walls painted in cheerful light colors. As Lena tucked them in, she noticed a small, almost invisible detail on the pristine white door frame. A fresh, deep gouge, just above the handle, almost like something heavy had been slammed against it. It had been hastily covered with a touch of white paint that didn't quite match. Evidence of violence hidden behind the veneer of luxury. "This house is too large for two children," Lena whispered to Gus, who had followed her into the hallway. "It's about security, not comfort," Gus replied, his voice a low rumble. "This house is wired tighter than Fort Knox. Mr. Adrian wants you and the children here because no one gets in without us knowing." Gus took Lena to a spacious guest suite near the children's rooms, a luxurious haven that felt strangely unsettling. It had a view of the back garden, which, Lena quickly realized, was less of a garden and more of an open, heavily monitored space. Later, after a mandatory meal in the deserted kitchen where she was served by a very quiet, nervous house staff member, Lena was restless. The silence of the mansion was deafening, occasionally broken by the soft, rhythmic footsteps of guards patrolling the corridors. She knew she shouldn't snoop, but her curiosity, fueled by the shell casing on her pavement, was too strong to resist. She slipped out of her room and found her way back to the main living area. Near the main staircase, the lighting was dimmer, casting long shadows. And that's where she saw the next piece of evidence. On a side table, amidst a collection of expensive art books, sat a small, intricately carved wooden box. It was beautiful, but her eyes were drawn to the plush, custom-made rug directly underneath the table. In the geometric pattern of the rug, there was a darker, rusty-colored stain, a stain that was stubbornly resisting the professional cleaning efforts. Lena, the nurse, didn't need a lab test to know what it was. Blood. And then there were the men. Adrian's men. They were everywhere, but they moved like ghosts, always present but rarely seen. They weren't casual security guards. They were disciplined, former military, or something even more specialized. They called Adrian the boss or Mr. V. And their respect for him was absolute, but laced with a clear sense of fear. The most unnerving encounter was in the house's massive, state-of-the-art gym. Lena had gone down looking for a water bottle. She found 3 men doing intensely focused combat training. They moved with a terrifying grace, executing precise, silent takedowns and strikes. This wasn't for fitness. This was training for survival. One of the men had a complicated scar running from his ear down his neck. When he noticed Lena watching, he stopped immediately, his posture shifting from killer to silent statue in a heartbeat. The sights fueled Lena's new fears. Adrian wasn't just involved in something criminal. He was a leader. This was the headquarters of a serious, perhaps violent, organization. But this new fear was tempered by a new curiosity. Why the intense focus on family life? Why the endless love and money spent on the twins' rooms? If he was so ruthless, why didn't he simply send the children away with a nanny and focus on his business? Why the wound taken protecting them? The deeper Lena steps into Adrian's world, the more complicated the truth becomes. If you've ever had a feeling that the person you knew wasn't who they seemed, leave a comment and share your thoughts. The next morning, the contradictions deepened. Gus presented Lena with a new wardrobe, simple, high-quality, nondescript clothes, and a new burner phone. "This is your communication line. Only use it for us," Gus instructed, placing the phone on the pristine glass countertop of the kitchen island. "Mr. Adrian has sent instructions. You are to remain here until he is well enough to manage. We will handle all outside contact, including your job. You are on indefinite leave of absence, starting now." Indefinite leave. Lena exploded, finally losing her composure. "You can't just make that decision for me. I have a life, a career." "We have already handled it," Gus said, his face impassive. "A specialist from a private firm contacted your hospital. They cited a family medical emergency that requires your full, undivided attention. You are being paid triple your regular salary, deposited weekly into a new, secure account. You do not have to worry about money, only the children's safety." Lena stared at him. Adrian didn't just deal in secrets. He dealt in total, ruthless control. He had wiped her professional life clean, leaving her with no ties to the outside world, effectively making her dependent on him and his organization. She felt trapped, angry, and deeply unsettled. She walked back to the children's wing, finding Maya and Liam already awake, playing quietly with the toys. "Lena, look. Liam and I made a fort," Maya beamed, holding up a complicated structure made of blankets and sofa cushions. The warmth in their eyes, the genuine happiness of two children who finally felt safe, dissolved Lena's anger. This was the one truth in the house of lies. They needed her. Adrian's power was terrifying, but it was also the only thing standing between these children and the people who would leave shell casings on her pavement. Lena sat down on the floor next to the fort. "That's an excellent fort. I bet no shadows can get inside that, right?" "No shadows," Liam confirmed seriously. Lena smiled, her decision solidifying. She would use Adrian's fortress, his money, and his security to protect the twins. She would not run. She would stay right here, in this house filled with shadows and secrets, until she could unravel the whole twisted truth. She looked at the bloodstain on the rug in her mind's eye. Someone had been hurt here, and she intended to find out if Adrian was the perpetrator, or the victim who got tired of running. Either way, she had two little hearts to mend and protect. The fight for hope and justice had just moved to Adrian's front line. Weeks passed within the confines of Adrian's luxurious fortress, and life settled into a strange, intense rhythm. Lena spent her days entirely focused on the twins. She taught them simple school lessons, read them stories, and supervised their games in the massive indoor pool. Maya and Liam were healing. Their silent terror was slowly being replaced by laughter, and they clung to Lena with a fierce, growing affection. Lena was no longer just the nurse who saved them. She was their safe harbor. Adrian remained in the hospital, his condition fluctuating, but the constant communication line between him and Lena was electric. Gus, the chief bodyguard, would bring Lena the burner phone every evening. It was a brief, private call, always starting with updates on the children, but quickly veering into something more complicated. "How are they sleeping, Lena?" Adrian would ask, his voice still ragged but gaining strength. "Like rocks. They tired themselves out in the pool today. Liam even asked if he could teach me how to swim properly," Lena would report, a smile in her voice. "They miss you, Adrian. They draw you pictures every day. Don't let them forget me," he'd respond, his voice dark. And then the conversation would shift. "Did you find anything else unusual in the house?" he'd press. Lena, who was now a master of subtle observation, would confirm her suspicions. "I noticed the security panel in the library isn't for an alarm. It looks like it controls a weapons cache." And the floor plans you have are outdated. There's a hidden sub-level access behind the wine cellar. Adrian would chuckle, a low, rich sound that sent a confusing shiver through Lena. You're a nurse, not a detective, Lena. Why are you cataloging my security flaws? Because your security flaws are my risk, she'd counter, her tone sharp. I'm stuck here, Adrian. If I'm going to protect your children, I need to know the full scope of the danger. You're fighting a silent war, and I'm standing on the front lines. The tension in these calls wasn't just about danger. It was about the unspoken attraction that simmered just beneath the surface of their guarded conversations. Lena hated his secrets, his control, and his dangerous life, but she couldn't deny the effect his deep, intense voice had on her. He was a ruthless man, yet every order he gave her was focused on her comfort and the children's well-being. And Adrian. He fought his feelings tooth and nail. He would cut the calls short, often hanging up just as the conversation got too personal. He admired her courage, her fierce loyalty to his children, and the sharp wit she used to challenge his authority. But he knew, with chilling certainty, that anyone he allowed himself to love became a massive, flashing target for his enemies. He was a man who lived by the rule: proximity equals danger. The heat of their connection reached a boiling point when Adrian finally returned home. It was 2 weeks after his surgery. Lena was playing a board game with the twins when Gus entered the room, his rigid posture suddenly softening. Boss is home. Adrian walked in, supported by a cane, looking pale and gaunt, but undeniably powerful. He wore simple dark clothes, but his presence filled the enormous room instantly. The children dropped their game pieces and launched themselves at him, crying out, "Daddy!" The sheer, raw emotion of the reunion brought tears to Lena's eyes. Adrian dropped his cane and knelt awkwardly, pulling the twins close, burying his face in their hair. It was a moment of pure, unguarded fatherhood, and it was beautiful. When he finally looked up, his gaze found Lena across the room. The air thickened. He had seen her in the harsh lighting of the hospital, covered in blood, but seeing her now relaxed and radiant in his home, surrounded by the proof of her unwavering care for his children, hit him with unexpected force. "Thank you, Lena," he said, the words hoarse and low, a depth of gratitude he couldn't hide. "You kept my heart beating." Lena could only nod, her throat tight. Over the next few days, Adrian stayed confined to his master suite, which was even more secured than the rest of the house. Lena, still the primary caregiver, was frequently called in. Their interactions were always about the children, but the close proximity made the tension almost unbearable. One afternoon, Lena was applying a fresh bandage to his shoulder. He sat shirtless on the edge of his bed, the extensive scar tissue a stark roadmap of the violence he'd endured. "The wound is healing cleanly," Lena murmured, her fingers lightly tracing the edge of the stitches. "But you need to rest. You look exhausted." "Rest is a luxury I can't afford," Adrian replied, his eyes fixed on her face. "You asked who I was, Lena. I deal in information. Very sensitive, very dangerous information. People want it, and they are willing to burn down my world to get it." He finally offered a fragment of truth unspoken, but it only raised more questions. "I'm not a murderer, Lena. I'm a guardian of secrets. But that doesn't make me safe." As she finished securing the bandage, her hand lingered on his warm skin for a moment longer than necessary. He reached up, his fingers circling her wrist. The touch was electric, a sudden, powerful acknowledgement of the attraction they had both been fighting. "You need to leave, Lena," he whispered, his voice dangerously soft. "Take the money, take the kids to an airport, anywhere. But you cannot stay here. They will come for you." "They already left a warning on my car," Lena reminded him, looking him straight in the eye. "And I don't run from people who threaten me. Especially when they are threatening 2 little kids who finally trust me." "You don't understand the level of darkness I'm involved in," Adrian insisted, his grip tightening, a warning in his touch. "I understand," Lena countered, pulling her hand away gently but firmly. "I understand you're a father who took a bullet for his children, and I understand you're terrified. But I also understand that right now, I am the only stability Maya and Liam have left. I won't leave. And you can't make me." Their wills clashed, a silent battle fought over the fate of the twins and the undeniable spark between them. Adrian looked defeated, not by her argument, but by his own fear for her safety. He knew she was right about the children, and that single truth chained her to his world. He simply nodded, acknowledging her choice, no matter how reckless he thought it was. "Then stay close to Gus. And don't trust anyone you don't already know in this house." As Lena walked out, the silence of the massive hallway seemed to swallow her. The emotional tension in Adrian's room had been thicker than any danger she had felt yet. She was falling for a man whose life was built on secrets and violence, a man who saw her as a target just for breathing the same air. But she also saw the good father, the desperate man underneath the power, and that man was worth fighting for. She walked towards the twins' room, her heart a mixture of excitement and dread. She had chosen her side, and now she had to live with the fear and the intense, undeniable heat of a love that was blooming in the most dangerous of places. She had hoped that love and justice could win, but she knew the journey through Adrian's dark world was just beginning. The fragile peace inside the mansion shattered 2 days after Adrian's return. It was the middle of the afternoon. Lena was helping the twins build a ridiculously tall tower out of blocks in the sunlit playroom, enjoying the sound of their easy laughter. Adrian was upstairs, supposedly resting, but Lena knew he was working, directing his silent operation from his secured suite. The first sign that something was terribly wrong was the silence. The low, constant hum of the mansion's security system suddenly cut out. Then, a second later, the sound of glass splintering explosively from the far side of the house. Gus, who was always nearby, was instantly in motion. His hand went to the small microphone hidden near his collar. "Code red. Perimeter breach. North wing. Get the kids," he yelled, his voice raw with urgency. He grabbed Lena's arm with one powerful hand, ushering her and the terrified twins toward the hidden panic room, a reinforced steel box disguised as a storage closet in the wall. The chaos was immediate and visceral. Shouts echoed from the halls, followed by the terrifying rapid crackle of automatic gunfire. "Get them in, Lena, now. Stay down," Gus ordered, his body becoming a human shield as he shoved them inside. But before Gus could follow, a figure burst into the playroom. He was dressed in black tactical gear, his face covered, carrying a weapon that looked entirely too large for the domestic setting. Gus didn't hesitate. He pulled his own sidearm and fired, the noise deafening in the enclosed space. The attacker dropped, but the brief delay allowed Lena to see Adrian. He wasn't supposed to be out of bed. But there he was, standing at the end of the hallway, a second pistol already drawn in his hand. He wasn't limping. He moved with the swift, deadly grace of a predator. He fired 2 precise shots at another approaching figure, and the assailant crumpled with a choked cry. Adrian didn't look like a recovering patient. He looked like the leader of a military operation. "Gus, secure the children. They want them as leverage," Adrian roared, his voice cutting through the gunfire. He wasn't shouting in fear, he was giving commands. Lena shoved the twins deep into the small room and turned back, adrenaline flooding her system. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. The man she'd bandaged, the loving father, was a professional killer. Adrian's eyes briefly met hers. There was no time for words, but the look he gave her was a mixture of desperation and dark apology. He knew she was watching, and he knew his secret was out. The fight moved quickly, brutally. More of Adrian's men swarmed the area, engaging the intruders in a terrifying dance of violence. Adrian, despite his injuries, was the center of it all, moving from cover to cover, directing his men with hand signals and cold efficiency. It was during a brief lull, when the immediate area was secured and filled with the sickening smell of cordite, that Adrian leaned against the doorframe, his chest heaving, his gun still aimed at the smoke. Lena, frozen in the doorway of the panic room, finally spoke, her voice thin with disbelief. "Who are you? The federal agents, the secrecy, the money, the men. Who are you?" Adrian turned his head slowly, his eyes hard and cold, devoid of the soft vulnerability she had come to know. He was covered in sweat, and his shoulder wound had clearly reopened, staining his shirt crimson. He straightened up, his posture projecting authority that transcended the injury. "My family name is Lazaro," he stated, his voice low and utterly devoid of warmth. "My father was the head of the Lazaro syndicate in the tri-state area. 2 months ago, he was eliminated. I'm the eldest son. I'm not just the boss, Lena. I'm the new head of the Mafia." The words hung in the air. Mafia syndicate. Lena felt the floor drop out from under her. All the pieces snapped into place. The incredible wealth, the ruthlessness, the instant elimination of her job, the bodyguards, the shell casing, the blood on the rug. This wasn't a corporate espionage war. This was a war between crime families. Adrian was the mob boss. "You brought me and your children into this," she whispered, her voice laced with sheer horror. "You dragged me into a war between criminals. Everything you told me was a lie." He didn't flinch. "I am not a liar, Lena. I said I was protecting my children. And I will burn the world down to keep them safe. These men," he gestured to the retreating attackers, "they are from the rival Conti family. They want to kill me and take the twins to end the Lazaro line. Your being here meant they had an extra layer to get through." The rational part of Lena's brain was screaming, "Run. Get out. He is a criminal leader. He is everything you should fear." But the emotional part of her brain, the part that had watched him take a bullet for his children, the part that felt the tension and attraction every time he spoke, was in complete panic. She wasn't just attracted to him. She had feelings for him. Real, deep, terrifying feelings for a man whose name was synonymous with organized crime and deadly violence. "And me?" she challenged, tears stinging her eyes. "What am I now? A hostage? A distraction?" Adrian finally let his gun hand drop slightly, the exhaustion and the weight of the moment pulling at his features. The softness returned to his eyes, the briefest flicker of the father she knew. "You," he said, taking a step toward her, his voice softening, "are the only person on this earth who doesn't look at me and see a killer or a king. You saw a bleeding man and 2 terrified kids. That makes you the most dangerous person I've ever met, Lena. And the only one I trust." "Trust?" Lena scoffed, taking a small step back. "You kill people, Adrian. You run a criminal empire. I'm a nurse who helps sick children. How can I have feelings for a man I should be terrified of?" He closed the distance, his eyes holding hers, full of a fierce, desperate intensity. "You should be terrified. I am dangerous. But I swear to you, Lena, the Lazaro syndicate will never harm you or those children. If you stay, it's because you choose to protect them. But you need to know, if you stay, I can't promise you a safe life. Only a life where I will always fight to keep you alive." The gravity of his words was undeniable. The mansion, once a luxurious cage, now felt like a war bunker. Lena looked past him, where Gus and the others were quickly and methodically cleaning up the bloody evidence of the attack. She had a choice: abandon the man she loved, the children who loved her, and go back to her quiet life, or stay and fight a war on the side of a mafia boss, driven by a promise and a fierce, terrifying love. Lena looked at the dark stain on Adrian's shirt, the evidence of his new wound, and then back at the terrified faces of Maya and Liam peeking out from the panic room. She took a deep breath, the smell of gunpowder stinging her nose. She was staying. The panic was still there, but it was overshadowed by a fierce, protective resolve. She wouldn't be Adrian's pawn. She would be his unexpected lifeline. "Get to a medical bay, Adrian," Lena ordered, her voice firm, the professional nurse resurfacing, masking her fear and her love. "You're bleeding again. And when this is over, we are going to talk about the kind of legacy your children deserve." Adrian gave her a faint, acknowledging nod. He had just revealed his deepest, darkest truth, and instead of running, she was telling him to get back into bed. He knew then that he was in deeper trouble than any rival family could cause. He was falling in love with the one person who could truly challenge him. He holstered his weapon, the sound loud in the hall, and allowed Gus to help him toward the stairs. Lena walked to the panic room, pulling Maya and Liam into a tight hug. She didn't know if she would ever truly be safe again, but standing in the heart of the Lazaro syndicate, holding the keys to its future, Lena felt a terrifying yet exhilarating sense of purpose. Love had chosen a dangerous battleground, and she was ready for war. The immediate aftermath of the attack was chaos contained. Adrian's men secured the perimeter, cleaned up the evidence, and maintained their silent watch. Lena, in her medical capacity, redressed Adrian's wound, the atmosphere between them thick with the unsaid weight of his confession. He was the head of a Mafia syndicate. She was in love with him. It was a truth too immense to deal with properly while the smell of gunpowder still lingered. For the next week, Adrian was a study in contradictions. He was the ruthless boss, issuing orders, organizing security retaliations, and managing his vast, dark enterprise from his secured suite. Yet, when he was with the twins, or when Lena was patching him up, he was Adrian, the man fighting for his family, the man who let his guard down just enough for her to see his desperation. Lena, meanwhile, started observing everyone closely, her internal paranoia ramping up. If the enemy could breach the perimeter, it meant they had inside information. She remembered Adrian's warning, "Don't trust anyone you don't already know in this house." But she didn't know anyone here. The betrayal came from the one person Lena thought she could rely on, Gus. Gus had been Adrian's shadow, the rock who had guarded the children and been Lena's primary contact. His loyalty seemed absolute. But one chilly evening, as Lena was playing Go Fish with the twins in the playroom, she saw him talking quietly on a sophisticated satellite phone in a dimly lit corner of the massive living room. His back was to her, but his posture was tense, secretive. She only caught a few fragmented words, but they were enough to stop her heart. Next delivery route. He's still weak. The woman is a problem. The woman. That had to be her. Lena slowly backed away, pulling the terrified twins with her, pretending to look for a toy. Her mind raced. Gus wasn't just talking. He was giving up vital information. He was the leak. The one trusted member who had flipped sides. She took the twins to their room and locked the door. Then, heart pounding, she marched straight up to Adrian's secured suite, ignoring the startled looks of the two guards outside. "I need to see him. Now," she demanded, her voice shaking with righteous fear. They hesitated, but the look of wild desperation in her eyes must have convinced them. They let her through. Adrian was sitting at a heavy mahogany desk, surrounded by maps and documents, a phone pressed to his ear. He hung up immediately when he saw her face. "What is it, Lena? What's wrong?" he asked, sensing the danger. "It's Gus," she whispered, leaning forward, fighting to keep her voice down. "I saw him. He was on a satellite phone, giving details about a delivery route, and saying, 'The woman is a problem.' Adrian, I think he's the one. He's working with the Conti family." Adrian's expression didn't change for a moment. He simply closed his eyes, a flicker of pain crossing his face, not from the wound, but from the shock of betrayal. He had trusted Gus for 15 years. He opened his eyes and immediately hit a silent button on his desk. Within seconds, two guards burst into the room. "Bring Gus to me. Now," Adrian commanded, his voice ice-cold. The confrontation that followed was brutal and swift. Gus was brought in, his face drawn, looking like a man caught in a snare. Adrian didn't raise his voice. His controlled anger was far more terrifying than a shout. He simply laid out the evidence, watching Gus squirm. Cornered, Gus didn't deny it. He spat out his confession. "You dragged us into a war, Adrian. You should have kept your head down. The Contis offered me more security, a way out. And that nurse, she's the one who messes everything up. She's the liability. She's the reason they came here." The guard's voice was loud and accusatory. He pointed a shaking finger directly at Lena. She showed up out of nowhere. She's a random waitress who stumbled into your life and suddenly has your kids. She's the distraction. She probably led them right to you. The accusation, though coming from a proven traitor, landed like a punch to Lena's gut. The truth was, she had stumbled into his world. She was just a nurse who occasionally waitressed part-time to pay the bills. And she had led the attackers to her car. The room fell into a tense, agonizing silence. Adrian looked from the trembling accusatory Gus to Lena, who was standing tall, fighting back tears of humiliation and fear. Adrian made his decision. "Take him out," he said to the guards, his voice final, his eyes never leaving Lena's. Gus was dragged out without another word. When the heavy door clicked shut, Adrian walked slowly towards Lena, the atmosphere charged with raw emotion. "Did you call anyone, Lena? Did you tell anyone you had my children, even before you came to the safe house?" he asked, his eyes searching hers, demanding the truth. "No," Lena whispered fiercely. "I told the detectives I didn't know where they were. I lied to them to protect them. I risked my life to keep your promise, Adrian. I have not betrayed you." He studied her face, the genuine hurt and fierce loyalty shining through her fear. He knew she was telling the truth. The random nature of her appearance, the simple, ordinary life she was forced to give up, it spoke louder than any accusation. She was the one anomaly in his ordered, dangerous world. "You have to understand, Lena," Adrian said, his voice dropping to a low, powerful tone. "In my world, trust is life. Betrayal is death. And now that you know who I am, you can't be half in. You have to be fully committed. I have to know without a single doubt that when the moment comes, you will choose us." He took her hands, his grip warm and absolute. "You're not a waitress anymore. You are in the Lazaro family, whether you wanted it or not. You are the guardian of my children. I need you to swear your loyalty to me, Lena. Not just to the twins, but to me. I need to know you won't walk away and betray me to the police or to my enemies." Lena looked down at their joined hands. She wasn't just swearing loyalty to a man, she was swearing loyalty to a war, to a powerful, dark enterprise. But she also remembered the sight of his body covering the twins, and the look of pure, unguarded love in his eyes when he held them. She had already chosen him, chosen the children, chosen the hope that the father could conquer the boss. "I swear it, Adrian," Lena said, meeting his gaze, her voice clear and strong despite the pounding of her heart. "I won't walk away. I will protect Maya and Liam, and I will protect you. But your loyalty to me and the twins has to be just as absolute. I want out of this life when the war is over, and I want a safe future for those children." Adrian simply nodded, a faint, almost grateful smile touching his lips. He knew she had given him everything. He pulled her close, resting his forehead against hers, the tension between them a mixture of danger and undeniable love. "Absolute," he promised, the word a sacred vow whispered in the heart of his fortress. Lena closed her eyes, accepting the terms of her new, terrifying life. The betrayal had cleared the shadows, forcing their commitment into the brutal light. She was no longer just a friend who stumbled in. She was his. Life inside the Lazaro fortress settled into an uneasy truce. Lena's vow of loyalty to Adrian was a bond forged in fire and blood, giving her an unexpected, powerful position. She was the one anomaly in his entire organization, the only person he allowed to challenge him, and the only one he trusted with his children. Adrian, in turn, began to rely on her not just as a nurse and guardian, but as a sounding board, a clear, moral voice in his dark world. He even started sharing more of his operation, giving her a deeper understanding of the silent war they were fighting against the Conti Syndicate. One evening, Adrian was in his secured office, reviewing surveillance reports with Lena sitting nearby, going through the twins' lesson plans. He pointed to a photo on a screen, a man dressed in expensive, tailored clothes, looking smug. "That's Salvatore Conti," Adrian explained, his voice flat. "He's the one who ordered the hit on me and the children. He wants to wipe the Lazaro name off the map and take control of our territories." Suddenly, Lena felt a cold, sharp dread snake through her. She leaned closer to the screen, her heart hammering against her ribs. The face was familiar. Too familiar. "Wait," Lena whispered, her voice barely audible. "Who did you say that was?" "Salvatore Conti." "Why?" Adrian looked at her, sensing the shift in the atmosphere. Lena placed a trembling finger on the screen, pointing to the smug, dangerous face of the rival boss. "I know this man," she confessed, her voice thick with swallowed fear. "I know him well. Before I was a nurse, I waited tables at a high-end restaurant near the financial district. He was a regular. He used to come in with his associates." Adrian stared at her, utterly stunned. "You waited tables for the head of the Conti family?" "Not just that," Lena admitted, closing her eyes for a brief moment, letting the wave of humiliation and terror wash over her. "I dated him. For nearly 3 months. This was 4 years ago, before I got my license and went full-time at the hospital. He introduced himself as Sal Marino, an importer. He was charming, very persuasive. I broke it off when I realized how controlling and possessive he was, but at the time, I just thought he was a wealthy jerk. I had no idea he was a Mafia boss." The revelation landed in the room like an unexploded bomb. Adrian leaned back in his chair, his expression shifting from disbelief to cold, calculating focus. "You dated Salvatore Conti," he repeated slowly, tasting the words. "And he knows your face. He knows your name. And you know his face, not just the code name he uses for public life." Lena's own hidden past, her unremarkable, entirely ordinary past, had just surfaced, and it was the most dangerous thing in the room. Before, Lena was a random nurse, an accidental witness. Now she was an asset, or a fatal liability. "He never knew my real last name. I went by Lena C. back then," she rushed to explain. "But yes, he knows me. We were at the same table, in close proximity, countless times." Adrian stood up, walking away from the desk. He didn't look angry. He looked disturbed. The revelation completely changed how he saw her. Lena wasn't just a random Good Samaritan. She was a variable, an unprotected flank he didn't know he had. "Lena, I asked you if you knew anyone in this world, and you said no," Adrian said, his voice low and serious. "I didn't know he was this world, Adrian. He was just a horrible ex-boyfriend who tipped badly," Lena pleaded, fighting back the injustice of the situation. "I never knew the name Salvatore Conti until you showed me that picture." The immediate threat was terrifyingly clear. Conti could use her. Conti knew her face. If they ever crossed paths, Conti would instantly recognize her as the woman who dated Sal Marino, and is now protecting the Lazzaro children. Lazzaro's weakness. Conti could use the information to spread rumors that Adrian was sleeping with his rival's past conquests, a massive sign of disrespect and weakness in their world. Blackmail/leverage. Conti could hunt her family or use her past to create a scenario where Lena is forced to betray Adrian. Adrian walked back to her, taking her face in his hands. He was trying to reconcile the image of the fearless woman who swore loyalty to him with the young, naive girl who had been seduced by his enemy. "This changes everything," Adrian murmured, his thumb brushing her cheek. "Conti will use this. He's meticulous, and he holds on to grudges, especially against women who walk away. He won't just kill you, he'll use you to destroy me." Lena could feel the warmth of his hands, but she could also feel the distance the revelation had created. He was pulling back, not out of anger, but out of sheer protective fear. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice small. Adrian looked around the luxurious, shadowed office, suddenly feeling the walls closing in. He made a quick decision. "We have to use this first. We have to make him think we don't know," Adrian decided, his mind already spinning tactical plans. "But Lena, you can never, ever leave this house. If Conti gets his hands on you, he'll find out what you know about the children. And he'll find out about us." He looked at her, his eyes intense. "You are more exposed than any of us now. You have to disappear entirely. No contact with your past life. No friends, no family, nothing. Do you understand the danger? Lena nodded, her heart heavy. She had sacrificed her job. Now she had to sacrifice her entire history. What about your family? Adrian asked suddenly, looking worried. Do they know where you are? No, Lena replied. My parents live in Jamaica. They think I'm on a long-term contract overseas. I told them I wouldn't have much service. No one here knows them, and no one there knows I'm in Canada. Adrian let out a slow, controlled breath. Good. That's one firewall we have. He stepped away, already moving toward his encrypted comms. He was the boss again, prioritizing the strategic danger over the emotional turmoil. Lena watched him, realizing that her ordinary past, the past that she thought had no connection to his darkness, was now their biggest vulnerability. Her simple mistake of dating a wealthy importer had turned her into a silent bomb planted in the heart of the Lazaro syndicate. But standing there, watching Adrian move with lethal focus to protect her and his family, Lena didn't regret her choice. She loved him. And she would not let Salvatore Conti use her past to destroy their future. She had to be smarter, faster, and more ruthless than the enemy who thought he already owned a piece of her. The war for the Lazaro family had just become a deeply personal vendetta for Lena. The revelation that Lena had dated Adrian's enemy, Salvatore Conti, amplified the tension in the mansion to a painful degree. Lena was now a walking, talking weak point in the Lazaro syndicate's defense. Adrian knew he couldn't protect her, or the twins, if Conti decided to use her past to lure them out. For a day, Adrian was distant, his mind entirely consumed by strategy. He spent hours on the phone, his voice a low, gravelly stream of commands, restructuring security and dispatching teams to deal with the inevitable intelligence leak. Finally, late that evening, he called Lena into his secured office. The atmosphere was heavy, the air thick with unspoken fear and the undeniable lingering chemistry that simmered between them. He bypassed small talk entirely. I've set up an escape plan, Lena, he announced, standing by the massive window that overlooked the city. The lights below looked cold and distant, like stars that offered no warmth. An escape plan for me? She asked, her voice steady despite the anxiety twisting in her stomach. For you and the children, Adrian confirmed, turning to face her. It's a contingency, activated immediately. Gus's betrayal proved that the walls can be breached. Your past with Conti means that the next time they come, they won't target me. They'll target you to get to the kids. I won't allow that. He walked over to his desk and slid a single pristine white envelope across the mahogany surface. Everything you need is in here, he explained. New identities, passports, 3 clean visas for a secure, neutral country, Iceland. You'll have a secure account with enough funds to last a lifetime. The plane leaves from a private airfield in 3 hours. Gus's replacement, a woman named Sophia, will escort you and the twins. She is completely clean and utterly loyal. Adrian looked exhausted, the weight of his criminal empire and the threat to his family pressing down on him. This is the safest way, Lena. For the twins to be truly safe, they need to be completely off the board. You are the only person they trust enough to go with. Take them and don't look back. Lena stared at the envelope. It was freedom. It was safety. It was the return to an ordinary life, far away from gun battles, betrayed bodyguards, and mafia wars. It was everything the nurse in her wanted. But she looked up at Adrian, his face a mask of controlled pain, his eyes pleading with her to accept the sacrifice he was making. He was asking her to take his children, the only innocent thing he had left, and disappear forever. And you? Lena challenged, her voice low. You stay here and fight alone? That's my life, Lena. It always has been, he replied, his gaze intense. My survival depends on keeping my hands clean of anything that can be used against me. And right now, you and the children are the biggest liability I have. I need you safe so I can focus on ending this war. Lena walked around the desk until she was standing directly in front of him. She didn't touch him, but the space between them crackled. You call us a liability, but you know that's not the full truth, Lena said, her voice firm. We are your heart, Adrian. If you send us away, you lose your reason to fight. You'll become the ruthless boss you pretend to be, with nothing human left inside. He never knew my real last name. I went by Lena C. Back then, she rushed to explain. But yes, he knows me. We were at the same table, in close proximity, countless times. Adrian stood up, walking away from the desk. He didn't look angry. He looked disturbed. The revelation completely changed how he saw her. Lena wasn't just a random Good Samaritan. She was a variable, an unprotected flank he didn't know he had. Lena, I asked you if you knew anyone in this world, and you said no, Adrian said, his voice low and serious. I didn't know he was this world, Adrian. He was just a horrible ex-boyfriend who tipped badly, Lena pleaded, fighting back the injustice of the situation. I never knew the name Salvatore Conti until you showed me that picture. The immediate threat was terrifyingly clear. Conti could use her. Conti knew her face. If they ever crossed paths, Conti would instantly recognize her as the woman who dated Sal Marino, and is now protecting the Lazzaro children. Lazzaro's weakness. Conti could use the information to spread rumors that Adrian was sleeping with his rival's past conquests, a massive sign of disrespect and weakness in their world. Blackmail/leverage. Conti could hunt her family or use her past to create a scenario where Lena is forced to betray Adrian. Adrian walked back to her, taking her face in his hands. He was trying to reconcile the image of the fearless woman who swore loyalty to him with the young, naive girl who had been seduced by his enemy. This changes everything, Adrian murmured, his thumb brushing her cheek. Conti will use this. He's meticulous, and he holds on to grudges, especially against women who walk away. He won't just kill you, he'll use you to destroy me. Lena could feel the warmth of his hands, but she could also feel the distance the revelation had created. He was pulling back, not out of anger, but out of sheer protective fear. What do we do? She asked, her voice small. Adrian looked around the luxurious, shadowed office, suddenly feeling the walls closing in. He made a quick decision. We have to use this first. We have to make him think we don't know, Adrian decided, his mind already spinning tactical plans. But Lena, you can never, ever leave this house. If Conti gets his hands on you, he'll find out what you know about the children. And he'll find out about us. He looked at her, his eyes intense. You are more exposed than any of us now. You have to disappear entirely. No contact with your past life. No friends, no family, nothing. Do you understand the danger? Lena nodded, her heart heavy. She had sacrificed her job. Now she had to sacrifice her entire history. What about your family? Adrian asked suddenly, looking worried. Do they know where you are? No, Lena replied. My parents live in Jamaica. They think I'm on a long-term contract overseas. I told them I wouldn't have much service. No one here knows them, and no one there knows I'm in Canada. Adrian let out a slow, controlled breath. Good. That's one firewall we have. He stepped away, already moving toward his encrypted comms. He was the boss again, prioritizing the strategic danger over the emotional turmoil. Lena watched him, realizing that her ordinary past, the past that she thought had no connection to his darkness, was now their biggest vulnerability. Her simple mistake of dating a wealthy importer had turned her into a silent bomb planted in the heart of the Lazzaro syndicate. But standing there, watching Adrian move with lethal focus to protect her and his family, Lena didn't regret her choice. She loved him. And she would not let Salvatore Conti use her past to destroy their future. She had to be smarter, faster, and more ruthless than the enemy who thought he already owned a piece of her. The war for the Lazzaro family had just become a deeply personal vendetta for Lena. The revelation that Lena had dated Adrian's enemy, Salvatore Conti, amplified the tension in the mansion to a painful degree. Lena was now a walking, talking weak point in the Lazzaro syndicate's defense. Adrian knew he couldn't protect her, or the twins, if Conti decided to use her past to lure them out. For a day, Adrian was distant, his mind entirely consumed by strategy. He spent hours on the phone, his voice a low, gravelly stream of commands, restructuring security and dispatching teams to deal with the inevitable intelligence leak. Finally, late that evening, he called Lena into his secured office. The atmosphere was heavy, the air thick with unspoken fear and the undeniable lingering chemistry that simmered between them. He bypassed small talk entirely. "I've set up an escape plan, Lena," he announced, standing by the massive window that overlooked the city. The lights below looked cold and distant, like stars that offered no warmth. "An escape plan for me?" she asked, her voice steady despite the anxiety twisting in her stomach. "For you and the children," Adrian confirmed, turning to face her. "It's a contingency, activated immediately. Gus's betrayal proved that the walls can be breached. Your past with Conti means that the next time they come, they won't target me. They'll target you to get to the kids. I won't allow that." He walked over to his desk and slid a single pristine white envelope across the mahogany surface. "Everything you need is in here," he explained. "New identities, passports, 3 clean visas for a secure, neutral country, Iceland. You'll have a secure account with enough funds to last a lifetime. The plane leaves from a private airfield in 3 hours. Gus's replacement, a woman named Sophia, will escort you and the twins. She is completely clean and utterly loyal." Adrian looked exhausted, the weight of his criminal empire and the threat to his family pressing down on him. "This is the safest way, Lena. For the twins to be truly safe, they need to be completely off the board. You are the only person they trust enough to go with. Take them and don't look back." Lena stared at the envelope. It was freedom. It was safety. It was the return to an ordinary life, far away from gun battles, betrayed bodyguards, and Mafia wars. It was everything the nurse in her wanted. But she looked up at Adrian, his face a mask of controlled pain, his eyes pleading with her to accept the sacrifice he was making. He was asking her to take his children, the only innocent thing he had left, and disappear forever. "And you?" Lena challenged, her voice low. "You stay here and fight alone?" "That's my life, Lena. It always has been," he replied, his gaze intense. "My survival depends on keeping my hands clean of anything that can be used against me. And right now, you and the children are the biggest liability I have. I need you safe so I can focus on ending this war." Lena walked around the desk until she was standing directly in front of him. She didn't touch him, but the space between them crackled. "You call us a liability, but you know that's not the full truth," Lena said, her voice firm. "We are your heart, Adrian. If you send us away, you lose your reason to fight. You'll become the ruthless boss you pretend to be, with nothing human left inside." She put her hand on the envelope, pushing it back toward his side of the desk. "I won't go," she declared, her choice between love and survival made in that instant. "I gave you my word. I swore loyalty. And I will not take those children and abandon the man who took a bullet for them. If I leave, Conti wins because he knows you're alone and weak. If I stay, you have to find a way to make us safe, together." Adrian stared at her, utterly defeated by her unwavering refusal. He was used to people following orders, taking bribes, or running in fear. Lena was doing none of those things. She was looking past the Lazaro syndicate and straight into the soul of the father. "Lena, I can't guarantee your safety here," he argued, his voice ragged with frustration. "Then I'll help you," she insisted. "I know Conti. I know how he operates. He's vain, he's insecure, and he's obsessed with control. We can use my knowledge of him against him. I'm a variable you didn't know you had, Adrian. Don't throw the asset away. Use it." Her passion, her stubborn refusal to be intimidated, broke through his defenses. He reached out and cupped her cheek, his touch surprisingly gentle, the raw, undeniable chemistry between them finally exploding into the open. "You're impossible," he whispered, a faint, genuine smile touching his lips. "You are reckless and completely, dangerously magnificent. I made a promise, Lena simply reminded him. He closed the remaining distance, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that was desperate, demanding, and full of the weeks of fear, worry, and burning tension they had suppressed. It was the kiss of two people who had found each other in the middle of a war, two souls tethered by two small children and a shared, profound danger. When he finally pulled back, Adrian rested his forehead against hers, his breath hitching. Then we fight, Lena, he vowed, his voice low and solemn. But now you are more than a guardian. You are mine. And if Conti touches you, I will end him and his entire line. The threat was chilling, but in that moment, it was also the most reassuring promise of love and protection Lena had ever heard. The fear hadn't vanished, but the hope of a life with this complicated, dangerous man had become more compelling than the fear of the war outside. Lena put her arms around his waist, holding him tight. She had chosen love over survival, and now she was ready to face the consequences. The days following Adrian and Lena's shared vow were intense and focused. Lena was officially brought into the war room, her knowledge of Salvatore Conti's personality, his extreme vanity and obsession with proving his dominance, becoming a critical asset. They used her insight to anticipate his moves, reinforcing the Lazzaro operation where Conti was most likely to strike, where Adrian seemed most vulnerable. Adrian, however, knew his enemies were just waiting for their moment. They had Conti contained for now, but the Conti syndicate was ruthless and patient. The final strike didn't come through the front gates. It came through cunning betrayal and calculated terror. It was morning. Lena was downstairs preparing breakfast for Maya and Liam, who were waiting excitedly at the kitchen island. Sophia, the new, fiercely loyal security head, was in the room, keeping a watchful eye. Adrian was upstairs in a secured meeting. The moment the attack began, it was clear this was a targeted, professional kidnapping, not a messy hit. The lights didn't fail, and the alarm didn't wail. Instead, the kitchen's reinforced windows were suddenly blanketed in a thick, choking smoke. Gas! Sophia yelled, shoving Lena toward the floor. Before Lena could move, two figures in gas masks burst through a pre-cut panel in the wall, moving with terrifying speed. Sophia immediately engaged them, drawing a weapon, but a third assailant emerged from the utility closet, knocking Sophia unconscious with a silent strike. Lena reacted instinctively, throwing her body over the twins, shouting, "Run, Maya, Liam, run!" But the men were too fast. They grabbed the children, who were now screaming in panic, and dragged them toward the exit. Lena lunged at them, fighting with the fierce, animalistic strength of a protective mother. She clawed at the assailant's mask, managing to tear a piece of fabric away, but was thrown violently against the countertop. "Tell the boss," the kidnapper snarled, his voice muffled. "Conti has his heart." They were gone. The entire incident took less than 90 seconds. By the time Adrian, alerted by the commotion and the breach in Sophia's communication line, came flying down the stairs, the room was empty save for the unconscious Sophia and the shaking, defeated Lena. Adrian stopped dead in the doorway, his eyes sweeping the scene, the tear gas residue, the broken panel, the missing children. The powerful boss crumbled, replaced by the shattered father. "The children," he choked out, his voice raw with a pain worse than any bullet. "Conti," Lena gasped, struggling to catch her breath, tears streaming down her face. "They took them, Adrian. They used gas. They want you to know they have them." Adrian didn't waste a second on anger or despair. He moved into action, the survival instinct of the Lazzaro leader taking over. He pulled Lena up, his hands shaking. "Conti has a secure holding facility in a warehouse district near the docks. He'll take them there," Adrian said, his voice flat with lethal focus. "We're going in, Lena. Now." He immediately gathered a small, tight crew, the only men he trusted, and armed Lena with a small automatic pistol. He looked at her pale, determined face. "You don't have to come," he insisted, though he knew she wouldn't listen. "I made a promise," Lena stated firmly, checking the safety on the gun. "I know Conti's profile. I'm coming. We're getting those kids. The drive to the docks was a blur of adrenaline and silent dread. Adrian drove, his face grim, his movements tense. They pulled up to the massive, dilapidated warehouse, which was surrounded by a few unmarked cars and armed men. "Conti's inside. He's waiting for me," Adrian muttered, glancing at Lena. "You wait here until I give the signal. Understand? Do not move." "Adrian, you are still injured," Lena protested. "Wait for the full team." "No time," he snapped. "Every second is a risk to them." The assault was immediate and aggressive. Adrian and his men stormed the warehouse, and the quiet night exploded with the sound of gunfire. Lena, tucked safely behind a pile of shipping containers, listened, her heart pounding in sync with the distant shots. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the firing subsided. Lena heard Adrian's voice, loud and clear. "Lena! Now!" She ran inside the massive, echoing space. The scene was chaotic. Debris, unconscious men, and the smell of blood. She found Adrian standing over a figure slumped in a chair, Salvatore Conti, defeated. And then she saw them. Maya and Liam were tied securely to two heavy support beams, their faces streaked with tears, but unharmed. "Maya! Liam!" Lena rushed to them, pulling a knife from her boot, a detail Adrian had insisted on, and quickly cutting their bonds. As Lena embraced the crying children, Adrian turned to ensure the rest of the area was clear. But Conti, slumped over, wasn't defeated. He made one final, desperate move. He grabbed a forgotten handgun on the ground and aimed it, not at Adrian, but at Lena and the children. "You lose the woman, Lazaro," Conti screamed, pulling the trigger. Lena saw the flash, and everything slowed down. She instinctively covered the twins, bracing for the impact. But it never came. Adrian moved with impossible speed, diving forward and throwing himself across the small space. He didn't cover the children, he shielded Lena. He positioned his body between the shot and his chosen family. A loud, sickening thud echoed as the bullet tore into him. Adrian gasped, a sound of pure agony, and slumped against Lena. Conti was immediately taken down by one of Adrian's men. Lena screamed his name, ignoring the surrounding carnage. She lowered Adrian gently to the concrete floor, pushing the terrified but physically unharmed twins back. She was the nurse again. The blood was immediately soaking through his jacket, dark and spreading fast. "Adrian! Talk to me! Where is it?" she yelled, tearing open his clothing to assess the wound. It was low, near his side. A gut shot. Much, much worse than the shoulder. He looked up at her, his face ashen, a flicker of pride and pain in his eyes. "You, and the kids," he whispered, his breath ragged. "Safe. That's all. That matters. Don't you dare talk like that. You shielded me." "Why did you shield me?" she cried, already pressing her hand hard against the wound, trying to staunch the impossible flow. A weak, pained smile touched his lips. "Because I can't live without you now, Lena. You're my reason." Lena worked fast, ripping cloth from her own clothes to pack the wound, issuing sharp, concise orders to Adrian's men to get a secure route to a surgical team. She was terrified, watching the life drain from the man she loved, but she was focused, driven by a new, fierce determination. She held his hand tight as his men loaded him onto a stretcher. The twins, clinging to her other side, watched their father being carried away, their small faces pale with shock. The rescue was a success. Conti was captured, the children were safe, and the war was effectively won. But the victory came at a terrible price. Lena looked down at her blood-soaked hands. Adrian had proven his love in the most absolute, devastating way possible. He had chosen her survival over his own. She hugged Maya and Liam tight, burying her face in their hair. They had gone from crying to absolute silence in the face of terror, but they were alive. She had a gravely injured man to save, and two children whose future now depended entirely on her strength. Love had won the war, but survival still hung in the balance. The world outside the hospital room was quiet, subdued by the finality of the successful operation. Salvatore Conti and his most dangerous lieutenants were apprehended, their syndicate dismantled by Adrian's swift, brutal counterattack. The silent war was over. Justice, in Adrian's world, had been delivered. But the real battle was happening inside the intensive care unit. Adrian was alive, but barely. The gut shot was severe, and the subsequent hours on the operating table were agonizing. He survived the surgery, but now he lay unconscious, a tangled web of tubes and monitors the only proof of his fragile life. Lena was a fixture by his bedside. She traded her blood-soaked clothes for fresh hospital scrubs, the familiar, comforting uniform of her old life. She was no longer just his guardian or his lover. She was his nurse, his fierce protector, and his tether to the world. The twins, Maya and Liam, were safe. They were back at the mansion, now secured and peaceful under the watch of a loyal, dedicated staff. They had suffered trauma, but they were resilient, and they called Lena multiple times a day, their small, insistent voices demanding updates about their father. "He's resting, my brave ones," Lena would tell them, trying to keep the strain out of her voice. "He's healing because he knows he has to come back home to you." The mansion was quiet now, the blood and the shadows removed, leaving behind only the stark reality of Adrian's immense wealth and the powerful organization he now led. But Lena didn't care about the power or the money. She only cared about the man lying still in the bed. Days stretched into a long, unbearable week. Lena never left his side, catnapping in the uncomfortable bedside chair. She monitored his vitals, adjusted his blankets, and talked to him constantly, pouring all her love and hope into his silence. She told him silly stories about the twins, recalled funny memories from her old life as a nurse, and even whispered all the things she had been too afraid to say out loud before the final strike. "You know," she whispered one afternoon, gently holding his still hand, "I hated your secrets. I hated being dragged into this world. But I can't imagine my life without the chaos, Adrian. Because the chaos brought me to you. And you showed me what real courage is, shielding me like that. You made the choice to protect me over yourself. You risked everything for love." She looked at the pale, handsome face of the Mafia boss who had chosen love over his own survival. "The syndicate can wait, Adrian. Your power can wait. Your children need their father. I need you, my impossible man." The fear was a constant, cold weight, but Lena pushed it back with fierce, unshakable hope. She reached down and brushed a few strands of dark hair from his forehead. It was the same look he had given her on that cold Toronto street, the look of a desperate father choosing his children's fate over his own. The room was bathed in the soft, warm light of the setting sun, painting the sterile white walls in hues of gold and rose. Lena leaned in close, resting her cheek near his. "I found you in the rain, Adrian," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion, but firm with promise. "And I swear to you, I'll stay until the sun comes." She closed her eyes, preparing for another long, silent night. And then, she felt it. A small, almost imperceptible pressure on her hand. His hand, still wrapped in hers, moved. Lena's eyes snapped open. She looked at his face. His eyelids fluttered once, then twice, before slowly lifting. His eyes, the intense, searching eyes she had fallen in love with, were looking right at her. He couldn't speak, but his gaze was steady, focused, and full of recognition. He tried to lift his arm, the effort immense and painful, but he managed to raise his hand toward her face. Lena immediately brought her face closer, letting him gently touch her cheek with the back of his fingers. A faint, tired smile touched his lips. He was back. Lena let out a choked sob, relief washing over her with the force of a tidal wave. She captured his hand, holding it against her cheek, tears streaming down her face. Tears not of fear or sadness, but of overwhelming joy. The Mafia boss was awake. The father was returning. The man she loved had fought his way back. Lena pressed her lips to his hand, a silent vow to never let go. The war was over, the children were safe, and Adrian was awake. Hope, love, and justice had prevailed, delivering them a chance at a new, fiercely protected life together, away from the shadows and toward the sunrise. In the end, Lena finally understood the truth Adrian had tried so hard to keep buried, that every choice he made, every secret he carried, every wall he built, was to protect the only things he had ever loved, his children, and eventually, her. The city may never know the sacrifices behind the man they once feared. The world may never hear the promises whispered between the cracks of broken lives mended together. But Lena, Adrian, Matteo, and Mila? They found something stronger than danger, stronger than fear, a family built not from perfection, but from survival, tenderness, and impossible devotion. And sometimes, that is the bravest kind of love there is. We have come to the end of the story. Thank you for watching to the end. Share your opinion about this story in the comments below. I like getting feedback from my audience. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our heartwarming stories.